Maya Chen had dreamed of this moment since she was 12 years old, watching the Lincoln Academy debate team dominate state championships on live stream. Now, standing in the mahogany-paneled conference room where final selections were announced, she felt her heart hammering against her ribs as Professor Williams shuffled through his papers. The following students have earned positions on this year's varsity debate team, he began, his voice carrying the weight of institutional tradition. David Chen, Sarah Martinez, Robert Kim. Maya held her breath. Maya Chen. The words hit her like electricity. She'd actually made it onto the most prestigious academic team at Lincoln Academy, the elite boarding school where her software engineer mother had worked double shifts to afford tuition. Around her, congratulations mixed with barely concealed shock from some of the other candidates. From across the room, she felt hostile stares burning into her. Ethan Winchester, the senior class president and debate team captain, was glaring with undisguised disgust. His jaw worked silently as he whispered something to his lieutenants, Marcus Webb, whose senator father had endowed the school library, and Tommy Harrison, a legacy student whose family name adorned half the buildings on campus. Maya gathered her leather portfolio and headed for the exit, but the three boys had positioned themselves strategically near the doors. As she approached, Ethan stepped slightly into her path. "So you're joining our little academic family," he said, his voice dripping with false civility. "How progressive of Professor Williams." "I earned my spot through the same tryout process as everyone else," Maya replied evenly, meeting his cold blue eyes. Marcus snorted. "Sure you did. I'm certain your unique background had nothing to do with it. The admissions committee loves these diversity success stories." "And what exactly is my background?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the heat building in her chest. "You know," Ethan shrugged with practiced indifference. "First-generation college track, scholarship kid. Not exactly the pedigree we're used to on the debate circuit. Our donors expect a certain caliber of representative." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Other students in the hallway slowed their conversations, sensing the tension crackling between them. Tommy shifted uncomfortably but echoed his friends. "Yeah, like, people who understand what Lincoln Academy really stands for. Tradition. Excellence. Heritage." Maya tilted her head slightly, studying their faces with the analytical mind that had gotten her this far. "I see. And you three are the guardians of that heritage?" "Someone has to be," Marcus replied, his voice carrying just enough volume for nearby students to overhear. "Some of us have been part of the Lincoln family for generations. We understand the responsibility that comes with wearing these colors." The implication was crystal clear, even wrapped in their prep school politeness. Maya nodded slowly. "Well then, I guess I'll have to learn from the best," she said with a slight smile that never reached her eyes. As she walked past them, she caught Ethan's whispered words to his friends. "This is exactly what's wrong with the admissions process. They're destroying everything our family's built here." That afternoon, Maya sat in her small single room, a stark contrast to the luxury suites the legacy students enjoyed, and video called her mother. Dr. Maya Chen appeared on the screen, still in her lab coat from her shift at the tech company where she worked as a senior systems analyst. "You look troubled, sweetheart," her mother observed with the sharp perception that came from years of reading code and people with equal precision. "Just adjusting to the new team dynamic," Maya said carefully. Her mother had sacrificed everything to get Maya into Lincoln Academy, working nights and weekends to afford the crushing tuition. Maya didn't want to burden her with social problems. Dr. Chen studied her daughter's face through the pixelated connection. "Maya, I've spent 15 years navigating corporate environments where people questioned whether I belonged. I know that look. What's really happening?" Maya hesitated, then decided on honesty. Her mother had always been her closest ally, the person who taught her that intelligence and preparation could overcome any obstacle. She explained the encounter with Ethan and his friends, their barely veiled hostility, their suggestions that she was a diversity admit rather than a qualified student. Dr. Chen listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. When Maya finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. "You know, in my line of work, we have a saying," Dr. Chen finally said. "The best defense against a system trying to exclude you is to understand that system better than the people running it." "What do you mean?" "I mean that entitled bullies rely on intimidation because they assume their targets won't fight back intelligently. They expect you to either retreat or lash out emotionally. They never expect strategic thinking." Maya leaned forward, intrigued. "Are you suggesting I should? What exactly?" "I'm suggesting you do what I did when my supervisor tried to sabotage my first major project presentation. Learn everything about your opponents. Their weaknesses, their fears, their dependencies. Knowledge is power, Maya. And power used wisely can create justice when the system fails you." The conversation planted a seed that would grow over the following weeks as the harassment escalated. It started small, Maya's research materials mysteriously going missing from the library, her access card to the debate practice rooms being temporarily suspended for no clear reason, whispered conversations that stopped whenever she entered a room. The real escalation began during Maya's first practice debate. The topic was economic policy, and she'd prepared extensively, armed with statistics and case studies that demonstrated her thorough understanding of complex fiscal theories. But every time she made a point, Ethan would interrupt with dismissive comments. "That's an interesting perspective," he'd say with patronizing patience, "but I think you might be misunderstanding some of the fundamental principles here. These are advanced concepts that require years of background in economic theory." Maya had actually published a paper on behavioral economics in a peer-reviewed undergraduate journal, but pointing that out would only invite more condescension. Instead, she absorbed the insults and noted how Ethan's own arguments relied heavily on outdated models and oversimplified assumptions. Marcus was more direct in his contempt. During a practice round on constitutional law, he openly challenged her knowledge of legal precedent, suggesting that scholarship students probably hadn't had access to the same quality of preparatory education. "No offense," he added with a smirk that made clear he intended maximum offense, "but some of us have been discussing these concepts at dinner tables since we were children. It's just a different level of exposure." Maya's breaking point came during the third week of practice. She'd been assigned to research a complex international trade argument, spending 12 hours in the library assembling a comprehensive brief that included primary source documents and original analysis. When she arrived at practice, she found her research folder sitting open on the common table, papers scattered and several key documents missing. "Oh, that's yours?" Tommy said with exaggerated surprise when she began gathering the scattered pages. "I thought someone had just left some rough drafts lying around." The arguments seemed pretty basic. Ethan examined one of her remaining pages with theatrical interest. "Actually, this isn't bad work for a first attempt. You might want to dig a little deeper into the source material, though. Really challenge yourself to think beyond surface-level analysis." The condescension was suffocating, but worse was the realization that they'd deliberately sabotaged hours of her work. Maya kept her expression neutral, thanked them for the feedback, and excused herself to make copies of her backup files. That night, she called her mother again. "They're trying to break me down," Maya explained, describing the latest incident. "They want me to quit or lash out so they can point to it as proof I don't belong here." Dr. Chen was quiet for several minutes, and when she spoke, her voice carried a different tone, sharper, more focused. "Maya, do you remember when I told you about strategic thinking?" "Yes. It's time for advanced lessons. These boys are playing games they think only they know the rules to. But every system has vulnerabilities, and entitled people often make the biggest mistakes because they assume they're untouchable." "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind that happen when privilege makes you careless. When you've never faced real consequences, you tend to leave evidence of your bad behavior lying around. Are you ready to stop being their victim and start being their problem? Maya felt something shift inside her, a cold clarity replacing the burning frustration she'd been carrying. Tell me what I need to do. The education that followed would have impressed any military strategist. Dr. Chen, drawing from her years navigating hostile corporate environments and her expertise in systems analysis, taught Maya the art of information warfare. First rule, her mother explained during their nightly strategy sessions. Never let them see you gathering intelligence. Be invisible. Be forgettable. Let them assume you're just the quiet scholarship kid who doesn't understand their world. Maya learned to map their routines, their social connections, their academic vulnerabilities. She discovered that Marcus had been struggling with organic chemistry despite his family's donations to the science building. Tommy had a pattern of turning in suspiciously similar papers across different classes. And Ethan, for all his confidence, had been caught plagiarizing sources in his junior year, a fact buried by his family's influence but still documented in academic files that Maya accessed through perfectly legitimate research requests. Information is only powerful if you know how to use it, Dr. Chen counseled. Direct confrontation gives them the upper hand because they control the social dynamics. Indirect consequences teach better lessons. The first lesson came during Maya's 4th week on the team. She'd noticed that Marcus always waited until the last minute to submit his chemistry lab reports, often copying sections from online sources and hoping Professor Martinez wouldn't notice. Maya anonymously submitted a detailed analysis to the Academic Integrity Committee, complete with side-by-side comparisons showing the plagiarized sections. When Marcus was called into a disciplinary hearing, he had no idea where the evidence had come from. His father's furious phone calls to the administration couldn't undo the documentation of his academic dishonesty. Marcus received a failing grade in the class and was placed on academic probation, jeopardizing his early admission to Harvard. Ethan and Tommy rallied around their friend, convinced that some vindictive classmate was targeting them, but they couldn't identify the threat. Maya maintained her quiet, studious persona, expressing appropriate sympathy for Marcus's unfortunate situation when the topic came up during debate practice. The second lesson targeted Tommy's habit of recycling essays across different classes. Maya had discovered that his supposedly original analysis of Shakespearean themes in English literature was nearly identical to his previous semester's paper on classical mythology, with only minor modifications to disguise the overlap. A carefully timed anonymous tip to both professors resulted in a plagiarism investigation that revealed Tommy's systematic academic shortcuts. His expulsion hearing was scheduled for the following month, with his family's legacy status offering no protection against documented evidence of repeated cheating. By this point, Ethan was becoming paranoid, sensing that his inner circle was under attack but unable to identify the source. His stress manifested in increasingly erratic behavior during debate practice, where he lashed out at Maya with barely controlled fury. "You think you're so smart," he snarled during a practice round on constitutional law, his polished facade finally cracking. "Sitting there with your little notebook, taking your careful notes, pretending you belong in these discussions." Maya looked up from her research with innocent confusion. "I'm sorry, Ethan. Did I do something wrong?" "Don't play dumb with me," he snapped. "I know you're involved in what's happening to Marcus and Tommy. Somehow, you're behind this." Professor Williams, who had been observing the practice session, intervened sharply. "Mr. Winchester, that's enough. Personal accusations have no place in academic debate. If you have concerns about Ms. Chen's conduct, you can address them through proper channels." But Ethan was beyond caring about proper channels. His world, built on assumptions of natural superiority and inherited privilege, was crumbling around him, and he needed someone to blame. That evening, Maya received a text from an unknown number: "Meet us at the library archives tomorrow at 9 p.m. Time to settle this." Maya stared at the message, recognizing the escalation for what it was. She forwarded the text to her mother, then began preparing for what she knew would be the final confrontation. Dr. Chen called immediately. This is them moving from psychological intimidation to physical threats, she said, her voice tight with concern. Maya, you need to inform the school administration. This has gone far enough. If I involve the school now, they'll find a way to make me look like the aggressor, Maya replied. 3 legacy students against 1 scholarship kid? They'll spin it as me being unable to handle academic pressure. Then don't go to that meeting. Stay in your room, stay around other people. Maya considered this, but she could see the pattern extending into the future. Ethan's paranoia growing, his behavior becoming more unpredictable, other students being drawn into his conspiracy theories about her. The harassment would continue and escalate until someone got seriously hurt. Mom, you taught me that sometimes you have to create your own justice when the system fails. This is one of those times. Dr. Chen was silent for a long moment. If you're determined to do this, then we do it right. No improvisation, no emotional reactions. Pure strategy. They spent the next hour planning Maya's approach to the confrontation. Dr. Chen walked her through de-escalation techniques, legal self-defense principles, and methods for documenting evidence. Most importantly, she taught Maya how to turn the encounter to her advantage. Remember, they're expecting the quiet, intimidated scholarship kid. Give them exactly what they expect until the moment you don't. The library archives occupied the basement level of Lincoln Academy's oldest building, a maze of narrow corridors lined with century-old academic records. Maya arrived at 8:55 p.m., having spent the day mentally rehearsing her mother's instructions. She positioned herself near the main entrance, ensuring clear sightlines and multiple exit routes. Ethan arrived first, his usual composed demeanor replaced by barely contained rage. Marcus followed, looking nervous despite his academic probation. Tommy brought up the rear, glancing around as if expecting campus security to materialize. Finally decided to show your face, Ethan said, his voice echoing in the empty corridor. Thought you could hide behind your anonymous tips and innocent act forever? Maya kept her expression neutral, channeling every lesson her mother had taught her about reading hostile situations. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Ethan. If you have concerns about my academic work, Professor Williams is always available for consultation. Cut the act, Marcus snarled, stepping closer. We know you've been sabotaging us. The plagiarism reports, the academic integrity complaints, all perfectly timed to destroy our futures. That's a serious accusation, Maya replied calmly. Do you have any evidence to support it? Tommy laughed bitterly. Evidence? You want to talk about evidence? How about the fact that all of this started the moment you joined the team? How about the way you sit there taking notes on everything we say, watching us like you're planning something? Maya tilted her head slightly. I take notes because that's how I learn. I watch because I'm trying to understand academic debate at the highest level. If that makes you uncomfortable, perhaps you should examine why. Ethan's control finally snapped. Because you don't belong here, he shouted, his voice cracking with frustration. This isn't your world. These aren't your institutions. You're a charity case who got lucky with test scores, and now you think you can tear down everything our family's built? The mask was off now, revealing the ugly truth beneath the prep school politeness. Maya felt a cold satisfaction as she recognized her mother's prediction coming true. Pressure would make them show their real nature. I see, she said quietly. So this isn't about academic integrity or team dynamics. This is about you believing some people deserve opportunities and others don't, based on their family background. Exactly, Marcus said, emboldened by Ethan's honesty. Some of us have been preparing for these roles our entire lives. We understand the responsibility, the tradition, the expectations. You're just playing dress up. Maya nodded thoughtfully, as if considering their argument. That's an interesting perspective. Tell me, in your years of preparation and understanding of tradition, did anyone teach you about the legal concept of conspiracy? The 3 boys exchanged confused glances. What? Tommy asked. Conspiracy, Maya repeated calmly. It's when two or more people coordinate to commit illegal acts. Like harassment based on socioeconomic status, or creating hostile educational environments, or making threats against fellow students. She pulled out her phone, which had been recording the entire conversation. It's also when people document their discriminatory intentions in text messages, like the one you sent me tonight, Ethan. Ethan's face went white. You're recording us? I'm protecting myself, Maya corrected. Which is what any reasonable person would do when receiving anonymous threatening messages. Marcus stepped forward aggressively. Give me that phone. No, Maya said simply, backing toward the exit. But I will be giving copies of this recording, along with documentation of your systematic harassment campaign, to Professor Williams, Dean Morrison, and the State Education Department's Civil Rights Division. You can't do that, Tommy said desperately. This will ruin everything. Our college applications, our family's reputations, should have thought of that before you decided I didn't deserve to be here, Maya replied, reaching the stairwell. Actions have consequences, gentlemen. I'm just making sure the consequences match the actions. As she climbed the stairs, she could hear them arguing frantically behind her, their voices rising in panic as they realized the full scope of their exposure. By the time campus security arrived, alerted by Maya's carefully timed call, the three boys were caught in the archives after hours, in direct violation of school policy. The investigation that followed was thorough and devastating. Maya's recordings provided clear evidence of discriminatory harassment and conspiracy to create a hostile educational environment. The text messages on Ethan's phone revealed months of planning and coordination. Academic records showed a pattern of targeting Maya's research materials and access to resources. Within a week, all three boys were facing expulsion hearings. Their families hired expensive attorneys and public relations firms, but the evidence was overwhelming and the school's liability was clear. Lincoln Academy, facing potential federal civil rights violations, moved swiftly to distance itself from the scandal. Ethan Winchester, despite his family's seven-figure donations to the school, was expelled and barred from campus. His early admission to Princeton was revoked when the university learned of his disciplinary record. Marcus Webb lost his Harvard acceptance and faced additional plagiarism charges that would follow him to any future academic institution. Tommy Harrison was expelled with a notation on his permanent record that would make college admission nearly impossible. The fallout extended beyond the three boys. Lincoln Academy implemented comprehensive anti-harassment policies, created anonymous reporting systems, and hired diversity and inclusion coordinators to prevent future incidents. Professor Williams publicly apologized to Maya and recommended her for accelerated advancement in the debate program. 6 months later, Maya stood on the stage of the state debate championship, holding the first-place trophy she'd earned through preparation, intelligence, and strategic thinking. In the audience, her mother beamed with pride, knowing that her daughter had not only survived an attempt to destroy her future but had transformed the system that enabled such attacks. The victory was sweet, but Maya understood it was about more than personal success. She'd proven that entitled bullies could be defeated by careful planning and principled action. More importantly, she'd made Lincoln Academy safer for the students who would come after her. As she accepted congratulations from her teammates, a genuinely diverse group now that the toxic leadership was gone, Maya reflected on her mother's lessons about strategic thinking and systemic change. Sometimes justice required patience, intelligence, and the courage to document truth when others preferred comfortable lies. The battle was over. The victory belonged not just to Maya, but to every student who would benefit from the changes her struggle had created.